The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of Green Acres and our guests. These general gardening tips and suggestions may work for you, as well as those from alternative sources. When using any garden products or tools, read and follow all label directions. And learn how to make your yard summer strong at bewatersmart.info.
The Green Acres Garden Podcast is the podcast dedicated to helping gardeners hone their growing skills while we celebrate our love of plants. So whether you're new to growing or a seasoned gardener, you're sure to learn something new. Join the fun as we have conversations with world-class growers, passionate green thumbs, and professional garden experts from Green Acres Nursery and Supply. Listen every week. We'll answer questions you didn't know you had. And away we grow. Hey there, and welcome one and all to the show. This is the Green Acres Garden Podcast. We are going to celebrate the harvest season the right way. We've got a great guest this week. We've got the editor-in-chief, Carol Connare, back with us for another great adventure. And actually, it's going to be a great episode because, you know, as gardeners, we're always looking to the future. And I think the Farmer's Almanac does that a little bit while also keeping one foot back in that romantic nostalgia, back in the past. I love it. To put that in perspective, the Farmer's Almanac was originated in 1792, and now with their 2026 edition, it is now the 234th consecutive edition. So without further ado, let's get into it with Carol Connare. Carol, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great. It's been an awesome growing season so far.
Can you tell our listeners, where about in the country are you, and did you grow a little bit this summer?
Yes, I'm in New England. I'm in New Hampshire, and I had a good year in a lot of respects and a poor year in some others. My fruit trees did amazing. We had a very wet spring. And then my vegetables, not so much. I got some not very great dirt, I think. And so it was topsy-turvy, shall we say. But I was just picking beans tonight and raspberries, so I can't complain too much.
Hey, there we go. Silver lining. God, fresh beans and raspberries. Are you kidding me? That sounds awesome.
Right.
Well, let's get into it. Like I said, I loved last year's edition. It was so fun to learn from you. I've seen the Farmer's Almanac before I grew up, seeing that book around, and it's really interesting. I didn't realize as a kid kind of the history and legacy about that it has. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about kind of the historical roots of the old Farmer's Almanac?
Sure. We've been around for almost forever. 1792. It was George Washington's first term as president because they were longer at that time. And I think it's kind of an amazing legacy. And what works is our founder, Robert B. Thomas. He had the recipe from the beginning. He wanted this book to be useful and entertaining with a sense of humor. And so we try to maintain that today, emphasis on useful. And, we're in the digital age. And so, I think a lot of people in the past year have been saying to me, it's this great alternative to my phone. It's like I can pick up a printed thing and get lots of things. So that's a good thing to hear.
Carol, it's so funny you mentioned that because as I was preparing for today's episode, I was reading the new manual you sent over, the Almanac, and I'm just kind of thumbing through it, and something hit me, and I'm like, I love this. I love the feel of the paper. I know everything, like we're in an increasingly digital world, but just that analog feel of the book, the paper, even, I don't know if I'm weird by saying this, maybe the smell of the pages.
Yeah,
I
right.
love it. Isn't that weird? Like it kind of brought me back to childhood a little bit. And there's just something comforting about it. But I'll tell you this, the best part about the old Farmer's Almanac in a paper form, there's no comment section. So it's all positivity. There's, like you said, it's useful. There's some fun stories in there. And we'll get into that. But I really love that you can touch it, feel it, and hold on to it. There's something about that.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. I think people might need that more than ever these days.
For sure.
Let's give a plug for our friends in Canada. We get all of our paper for the Almanac from Canadian paper makers, and they call it Almanac paper because we print so many and use so much paper.
Good
so
to
it does
know.
have a certain aroma.
Yeah, I love it. It smells so good. Well, what's new? I mean, this year it's 2026. The old Farmer's Almanac really is forward looking from what I can tell. So let's get at the weather predictions. That's what really kind of got you guys on the map, giving farmers an idea of what the general weather and climate could be for that future growing season. And what does it look like? And then how did you actually even come to this idea?
Well, first of all, as you said, back in the old days, when we first started out, a grower needed any kind of a leg up that they could. And so having a long range weather prediction was that, especially when we depended on our farms for the food. And so our founder, Robert B. Thomas, was an astronomer, and he developed a formula for predicting long range weather, which uses the solar cycle, the magnetic storms on the sun. And so we don't have a secret formula. We like to let people know we have our own team at AccuWeather, but they do use our long-term, long-standing formula. And that's really what it is. It's about data. It's looking at patterns. But of course, nowadays, when we're in a warming world, we're also tweaking a lot of that data to just reflect what we know and what we're seeing. So, prediction wise, we're calling for a pretty mild overall winter for most of the US, though not true for the eastern seaboard and down to Florida. We're predicting actually a colder than normal, wetter than normal winter. And snow wise, again, it's kind of like we're saying last year there was snow pretty far south, and we're saying again, you're going to see it in the Carolinas, you're going to see it in the eastern Ohio Valley, you're going to see it even in the desert Southwest. So there's some anomalies, but overall, we're saying that precipitation and temps will be precipitation is a little bit down most of the country, and temperatures are going to be on the warm side. So again, you can look for the very we predict the weather for 17 regions every day of the year. So if people want to pick up the book for less than $10, it's a pretty good bet. This year we were over 90% on our, I think we're in the 80s for 80% on temperature, if I'm right, 16 out of 18 regions off of normal, and precipitation, I think we were 17 out of 18. And so, what we're talking about is maybe 2 or 3 degrees difference, but in some places we know that makes all the difference. If your buds are on the trees and that's between freezing and not freezing, or if you're going to have less snow cover, which is, for some of us, a fertilizer, what are we going to do to protect our plants over the winter? So there's lots of information about that, but that's what we're calling for. And yes, we base that on data, and it's out there, but also knowing that the growing zones, the hardiness zones did all tick up for almost everybody in the US, at least half a zone or a full zone a couple of years ago. So we do those tweaks. But, I think the questions we're getting the most from people is about those very short-term, very hardcore rain events, like a lot of rain falling in a short amount of time. And so really the indicator there is that with a warming planet, there's just more moisture in the atmosphere. So the risk of those is greater, that when you get that moisture, it could really come. It might be that you don't have more overall for your region. You might be getting 5 inches or something for the winter, but you might get a lot of that in 1 or 2 very big storms. And we know that has severe implications for erosion and soil. So I think more than ever, we're really seeing people pay attention to soil as the resiliency factor, both for drought and for these rain events.
Well, it's very important. I like that you brought that up, because for us, I mean, it's every single week. Soil and soil health and building that soil really tends to be one of the key factors in having a healthy garden, at least from our perspective. And so to get some knowledge and a little head up on when to protect your soil, maybe how to protect it, I think can be very beneficial for sure.
I think what's interesting is, we have an archive of all of the almanacs going back to 1792, and we've been doing a big indexing project and thinking about what stories we do over and over again. And it's just fascinating to see the attention to soil in the 1790s and the early 1800s, planting green manure crops that we can plow under, and just really thinking about, of course, back then, everybody's a small scale farmer. They've got livestock. They're putting that manure onto their soil. They're regenerating the soil. We all know what happened with the Dust Bowl. It's like we're relearning, but certainly when you go back in time, soil was very important to the early farmers. They paid attention to it, and that was innovation at the time. Like, crops that you would plant to plow under to feed your soil.
What's old is new again. So, Carol, I love this weather talk. Can you kind of zero in a little bit on our region and let us know? We're here in Sacramento, Northern California. What is our winter and summer going to be like potentially for this upcoming seasons?
So we are saying winter, you're used to this, is going to be warmer and drier than normal. So more of what you've been seeing.
No, I want rain. I want rain, Carol.
I know. I'm so sorry. And also below normal mountain snow. So if you're escape to the mountains, don't expect that much. Though we're saying cold temperatures. in late January and late February. So you get a little respite there. But look for storms. We're saying in late November, mid January, and late February. Spring, warmer than normal and below normal rainfall. I know you don't want to hear that. And a hotter and drier than normal summer.
We're used to hot and dry, so I guess it is what it is. It just means more drip systems, and we'll have to use more organic matter in our soil to hold on to that moisture. More mulch as well. I saw in your almanac that you have trends for 2026, and the trends they span so many different categories. I think food, pets, culture, even travel. I love the agritourism that popped up in there. So have you seen that as a trend? Because I noticed some farms that I visited, they've really transitioned into being able to kind of support their income by bringing people to their farm in fun and exciting ways. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. In fact, we're picking up on that. And then in the 27 edition, we're going to be doing a bigger feature about that. And we have some of the U.S. farmers profiled about that as well, is how are we diversifying our business? It's kind of like any business, right? Farming, you got to diversify your income streams. You need them throughout the year. It can't just be a seasonal thing. So what does that look like? That looks like bringing people to your farm, maybe doing hay rides or pumpkin patches or corn mazes, having weddings, bringing school groups on, having people buy direct from the farmer, whether that's, grass-fed beef or flower bouquets or whatever it is, or value-added products. We're seeing a lot of that. I have tomatoes. I might bring those to farmer's market. I'm an amazing tomato farmer, say, but now I'm going to make those sauces. I'm going to go into a new income stream, and people can buy that from me as well. Or even delivery. We see farms making headway by doing delivery. We know people like to get their groceries delivered. Well, why not get your farm produce delivered? So a little bit of different on the CSA or the share model.
I love it. Yeah, straight from the farmer. Yeah, cut out the middleman. Very cool. Yeah, those trends are great, and there's so much in there to pick through. One of the fun things about the book, you said there's a lot. It's to be useful and helpful, but there's just a lot of fun stories and things in there that I really enjoy. And the historical connections, something that I really kind of get caught up in. And one that I really loved, and maybe we can dive into it a little bit, is that there's an article in this year's almanac, and it talks about how gardens were in 1776 when the country was founded.
Scarrots.
Yeah, eat your scarrots. So can you tell us a little bit how were gardens different or similar to how we garden now? Were they different? How did people approach it, and what were they like back then? And what is a scarrot?
Right. Well, I think in my view, we hear from a lot of people, even like the homesteading community, say, that the idea of having, it's really a kitchen garden. We could call it a kitchen garden. That's what the story is really about, is in 1776, 250 almost years ago, when this country was founded, most people had one. That's really what we had. And so outside your kitchen door, your kitchen obviously wasn't always attached to your house because it was most likely to burn down. So a lot of people might have like an ancillary building or right off the back. And so it also made that accessible to the garden area. So everything you wanted to eat would be out there, but also medicinals. People were growing their own medicinal plants. And, certainly in 1792, when we began, medicine was non-existent or in its infancy. And so plant medicinals were actually what people depended on. And so your garden would have edibles, but also it would have your livestock just beyond. You'd have fruit trees kind of around the back, and then you'd really have things like chamomile or, comfrey or other plants that are really coming back, I think, into popularity because we understand that they're good for us and they're actually good for the other plants. They're kind of these key companion plants to having a better crop. So scarrots are really a precursor to carrots. They're a hardy little root vegetable, and a bit like a turnip, or a parsnip. I will say a parsnip.
Oh, I love parsnips.
Right, and these are a little bit sweeter, and so you can still. I was looking online; you can still get seeds for these. It's an heirloom variety, but this was a major crop. Like everybody had them at the time because they. It's the triple threat. It's like easy to grow, easy to store, and it's really good for you. So eat your scarrots.
Eat your scarrots, yeah. And I read in the article, it talks about how they position it on the side of the house so you don't have to always look at it, although I love the look of a vegetable garden. and then it's near the stables, so you have quick access to the manure. And I'm sure they didn't talk about it in 1776, but I have to imagine those home gardens, those kitchen gardens, were organically cultivated. I'm sure
Of
nobody
course.
was was touting their horn on that one. It just was the norm.
Right. And if you read, the farmers' essays are one of my favorite parts of the almanac. And those are on the calendar pages, and we have one for every month. And it's really evocative of the season, or we know that every month really is its own season, maybe even every few weeks when you're a gardener. But back in the day, it's kind of funny because the tone of them is sort of rueful and didactic, like, you must be tending your cows, or he who doth not, will be
Yeah,
paying
yeah.
for it later. Find a good wife.
Yeah, you will if not, you will come down with the cold.
Exactly. And you'll be sorry. And then in December is like the only month you get off.
That's fun. I noticed in there, it was pretty cool. I love how it's very farmer and grower and garden centric. What are some of the major obstacles that farmers in the U.S. right now, what are they facing, and how are they dealing with these?
Well, I think we touched on a few of them. I think, one of them is challenging weather. And so, when you are an industrial farmer, say, that's harder to think about making a large amount of land regenerative, so it's easier for the smaller farmer. But I think there's a lot of attention to that. You'll see that in our trend section, like even large farms planting pollinator hedges. We know we need those pollinators to get our crops pollinated. And so let's bring them in with beneficial plants that are also good for the soil, also good for resiliency. There is robotics coming in, I think, because farmers also need to deal with in this climate, we see invasives getting worse. In our garden guide for 2026 that will come out in January, we do a whole story on invasives and really how to get rid of them, the most common ones. And I think farmers deal with that on a larger scale, and so they're finding that they can use a lot less pesticides or herbicides if they target those. And there's literally robots that can do that. Other things they're facing is, their markets. We know with the tariffs, like things have gone away, or easier markets. And so that they're finding new markets. And actually, I think that's been good for some farmers for innovation. Also, again, like we said, really direct to consumer. Can they promote themselves? Farmers having to become marketers, I think is a trend that we're also seeing, is like doing podcasts or social media to make sure that they're connecting with their consumers on the places that they are, so that they can let them know about what they have. So I think those are some of the things. Also, just finding help, not just because of immigration and some of the labor force getting pressured, but just that's already been a problem. And so, what does that look like, and how can they be innovative? Again, there are some technologies coming online that can help with in-time harvesting, but deploying those is a lot of money. And so, all these forces are at farmers, is like how to integrate technology, sort of those larger market forces, and then also staying true to what you do. We do see there's a trend. I think we're going to touch on it in 2027 about younger folks coming back to the farm. And why? It's because technology, marketing, these things that maybe they've gone to go get schooling in are actually really now applicable. Biology, all of these sciences, and really liberal arts in a way are very much relative to how a farm is going to survive today.
Yeah, farmers, from the sound of it, they really have to wear a lot of hats, and they have to be kind of a jack of all trades to really be successful.
Right. Backyard growers, not so much. We have a bad year, we still can go to the farmer's market.
Yeah, we move on. It's like we learn, we take our lumps and just, we'll come back next year.
Right.
So I've noticed that you guys have some pretty incredible stories in there. I love the little short stories, the essays. What is one of your favorite from this year's Almanac? You've got to have one.
Oh, I have several. We have one that's not, it's like kind of not farming, but it's growing adjacent, is about aromatic houseplants. Because I think, it's so cool that houseplants saw this huge surge with COVID, and during the pandemic, it was already happening, certainly with like the younger generation. And, older generations like mine have always been houseplant fanatics, but then the time and the energy that could be spent to sharing that with others and propagating and collecting. And so I love that story because it's just so fun to think about filling your house with all these scents, just as you're a houseplant fanatic. You can go get one of these wonderful things like a jasmine or even a citrus, something like that. And I think we are learning more and more about the health benefits of just plants generally. There's a lot of science around just sticking your hands in the dirt and breathing in those microbes is actually a stress reliever. And certainly aromas are one of those big things. And so, how good that is for us as people and something plants can give us. So I really love that story.
And especially when most people think of houseplants, we're not instantly, equating it to fragrance. So when I saw that article of fragrant houseplants, it kind of clicked with me too. I'm like, ooh, I like that. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, I mean, I have several other favorites. I think it's just kind of a funny subject is leftovers. We were banding about on staff like, well, we need to do a food story, and many of us bring our lunch, and like some people are like anti leftover, and some people are like, yeah, I'm just making a fresh sandwich, and other people are like, no, I have to have leftovers for lunch. So we really decided to dig into that subject, and there's some science behind it. There's some popularity polls, and I think that's a really fun one too, just because as growers, as people who like to grow their own food, and typically are cooks, we end up with leftovers.
Oh, for sure. I'm a father. I've got 3 little boys. I make big meals. There's always leftovers. And this quote from George Carlin in there really got to me. So can I share that with us?
Absolutely.
I loved it. So this is from George Carlin, American comedian, legend.
But leftovers make you feel good twice. Did you ever think about that? Leftovers give you 2 separate good feelings. When you first put them away, you feel really intelligent. I'm saving food. And then, after a month, when hair is growing out of them, and you throw them away, you feel really intelligent. I'm saving my life.
So they can be enjoyed twice, for sure. I love it.
I had a grandmother who grew up during the Depression, and we would always have to clean out her fridge because she would save every little last thing, and it was very, very blue and hairy and lots of mold growing on it. And I'm sure that's why we never got sick.
You're like, your cottage cheese went bad. It's like, that was actually milk. It's like, okay, then your milk's really bad. I've been there. I'm guilty. I love how the Almanac gives you also a lot of like tips and hints on different things you can do. What are some of the ways the Almanac can help people actually save money and just live a little bit happier? Is that possible?
Oh, I think so. If you look at our reference section, for one thing, just lots of tips to do things better in your own life. Like I think this year we really try to refresh the reference section in the back of the book. And this year we have a whole set of tips about when to harvest your produce and how to store it for longevity. So I think that's a really helpful one. We do have the frost and planting tables, which prevents you from planting things too early and wasting a lot of seed. Certainly leftovers is a frugal person's game. Even the idea of a kitchen garden, is also something that we're seeing that people are turning to. I can grow better food and cheaper food, and not have to go to the store. That saves on so many fronts. So I think there's lots of tips like that, that you'll find throughout the book. So also honey, we have a fun story about honey, and honey is really a home remedy. And there's lots of new science about how honey heals all kinds of things, from wounds to what it can do internally for you. So that's something simple that people usually have access to, but they may not know. So we have even a tip on how to make honey drops that you can up your honey quotient if you'd like. So just things that, are just information. So it's like, oh, I have honey and I never eat it. Well, maybe if I do, I'm going to use that for this or that, ailment, and how to make a hot toddy, which more than once I've had to have one of those.
I love honey. Personally, I love concentrated nectar and bee spit. It's delicious. It's awesome. Honey's great. I love adding it to my vinaigrettes when I'm making a nice cucumber salad or something. It's just the best.
Exactly.
I love it.
It's I've used it in baking all the time too. We give the substitutions in there. It's, if you don't want to be using sugar in your recipes, honey can be a great alternative. It's just a little bit different amount, and it works really well in most recipes.
Hootalolly. I love it. If someone's curious and they're like, all right, I'm sold. I need something to read, at the house or kick around a little bit. Where can people find a copy of this year's edition?
Just about anywhere you buy your garden supplies. We are in stores across North America, to be honest with you. Big box stores from Lowe's and Ace Hardware to mom and pop shops. Also, Almanac.com is a great place to buy the Almanac, and we're on Amazon. So, really, anywhere you would buy books. So, you'll see us. I mean, newsstands are pretty much shrinking. So, a lot of stores, we just have our own stands. Like this time of year, you could walk into supermarkets. I get pictures from friends around the country this time of the year when they send me the snapshots of the almanac's out, and it's like right there at the register. So, and it has lots of our calendars and journals and some other products too. But the almanac is the big seller this time of year, and really, it's available in all those places through the new year. Sales really continue through January. But if people you also want to just get a taste of things, Almanac.com is a great place to see what we're doing. It's a little bit different. You don't get the features, you don't get some of the in-depth stuff, but a lot of the tools are there. And in fact, with AI, hitting all of our lives in different ways, we've been developing more and more tools that are sort of non-AI, like I want to plant a container garden. What size container do I need for tomatoes versus cucumbers? I need to order mulch. How do I measure that? How do I do that? What day of the week was I born on? If I punch in my birthday, I might just want to know that if it was a Thursday or a Wednesday. So, there's lots of fun calculators and tools online too, which are a great addition to the book, but I think also have the flavor of what we're doing if people want to check that out.
Yeah, I noticed that you sent over a few copies for us to enjoy before our interview. Appreciate it. And you also sent over an annual garden guide, which I didn't even know you guys had. That's pretty cool.
Thank you. It's really, it's our companion publication to the Almanac. It comes out in January. We're just finishing up the 2026 edition. And I don't mind giving you a little preview of some of the stories. It made me think of what you said because it was a writer in California. We have a story about firefighters, what to plant in the yard to combat wildfires. Like, it's true. If you look at some of these photographs after a fire, you can see some of the landscape still standing, and that might be the only thing. There's a lot of things that you have to do to your house. You don't, unpainted things are bad, and how firebrands get in. But your plants and your landscape can actually really protect your house and also have added benefits. Like citrus is an incredible tree to plant because it is a firefighter and also produces fruit. So we have a lot of tips about that coming out and a really fine story about that, as well as the invasives. Like I said, I think one thing that a warming world is doing is letting the invasives come in. I know in my yard, I've been paddling knotweed. I have friends who are really nice people otherwise, but when they talk about bittersweet, they get nasty and, trying to eradicate these things just from our yards. But then you can also see the toll they're taking on larger scales. So we have a story about how to get rid of them in your own area and what to do about that. For fun stuff, let's see, we have this cool story on black flowers, like the goth flowers. And so our top picks for those, if you want to add that to your landscape.
That is pretty cool because you don't see those too often. You don't see a lot of black blossoms.
And more their hybridizers are really getting into it, so there's some fun stuff. One thing that we don't do much of in the East, I think, as home growers is we plant a lot of green beans, like I was just picking tonight, but we don't do a lot of dried beans. And so we have a story about that. And about peppers, again, a hot weather lover, right? They can really thrive. So some stories about that, a story about that in the new garden guide.
I've got some ghost peppers in our school garden ready for you there, Carol. Come by for a bite and some habaneros as well. I couldn't help but notice on your bio, it said that you're working on the old Farmer's Almanac for kids as well. Where can we see that? Because I have children and they'd probably love it.
Oh, I'm going to make a note to get some out to you.
Oh, bless you.
So that is every other year. It's an incredible publication. We just came out with volume 11. There's a toucan on the cover, and you'll see it for sale in a lot of places. We sell the Almanac, but it's also available online. And this year, some really fun stories There's one about how to grow a pizza patch. And then on almanac.com, you can buy like the little bundle of seeds to do the pizza patch, which is super cool. And just think, but more than that, animals, all the things that we do in the Almanac, but for kids, facts, calendar stuff. I wrote a story on hula hoops for the issue. We have a tornado chasing story. Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's probably 40 or 50 stories. And again, I don't know about you, but maybe you don't want to give your kid a screen, you're going on a road trip or something else. And all the studies that have just recently come out about reading, reading is down, except not reading to kids. And so kids are kind of our frontier here of making them good readers. And so the Almanac for Kids is definitely part of that.
That's awesome. If you had one last thing to say to our listeners, call to action, what would you say to them?
Oh, I think just what we said before, like I think all of us would love to maybe have some screen time out. And, we know reading is a really great way to enjoy life. And so I think you'll find, if people are looking for a reason to put their phone down, you can't find a better one with the Almanac. It's still got the hole in the corner. You can hang it wherever you'd like, on a nail, on a string. That's ultimately we're useful. I think that people will find that. And also I think it brings a smile. It's we're apolitical, which is sometimes a nice thing too. And so, just bringing joy to people's day.
Yeah, for sure. It's just fun, interesting stuff. And I think people, if they give it a shot, they're really going to get hooked on it. It's a lot of fun. Carol, last question before we go. Have some fun with you. If you were a flower, what kind of flower would you be, Carol?
Oh, I'm a sunflower for sure. I follow the sun, heliotropism. I like to be outside, and I planted a few this year, which in my old yard I couldn't. I had too many deer, and I just love it. They're taller than me. I went out there on a rainy, April morning and planted a bunch of seeds, and to see those guys 6 feet tall right now, yeah, gives me a lot of pleasure, and I feel with them.
There we go. All right, Carol, the Sunflower Connare, editor-in-chief of the Old Farmer's Almanac. Hey, thank you so much for being here, Carol. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin.